I'm Paul Page, and this is The Skinny.
From the Fatheadz Eyewear Studios in Speedway, Indiana, this is The Skinny, brought to you by Toyota, Rhino Classifieds, General Tire, and Dream Giveaway. This segment of The Skinny is brought to you by Dream Giveaway. Dream Giveaway has been giving away high-end American muscle cars to raise money for charity since 2007. Dream Giveaway is known for giving away classic and new muscle and paying the federal taxes so the winners don't have to. For $25, you can jump in the game, and part of that goes to charity. You'll have a chance at winning some of the coolest cars on the planet. Check it out at dreamgiveaway.com. Boy, what an exciting show we have coming your way here today on The Skinny. One of the best in the business has joined us. Certainly privileged for him to take the time to come into the studio. Ken Stout, the track dude, Michael Young, is joining me here once again as Rico is out this morning. And the guy sitting along the side of us is, he's just one of those voices. When you hear it, you knew everything was right in the world. Bob Jenkins was one of those voices. Paul Page, certainly one of those voices. And before we get going here, I also have to say, by the time you hear the show, it'll be a week in the rears, but we start the show off in a very somber mood as we lost Bob Jenkins just a couple of weeks ago, and we've just received news this morning, literally minutes ago, that we have lost Robin Miller as well. Talk about one of the all-time greats, fellas. I mean, that's a huge loss right there. Goosebumps. I mean, it's really a little hard to talk about.
When he wrote, he wrote so beautifully. If it was a big issue, he was so dead on. He could get right to the point. He wasn't afraid of anybody. He said what he thought was right, and 99% of the time he was right. But he could also write fun. And as a person, he was always fun. He was a joy, and he brought it to everybody else. We have a lunch every Friday that he started, and social, fun, an enormous hole in our whole industry.
You know, you have such a polarizing figure for especially in the IRL and Champ Car days, and I don't think a lot of people realize what a kind-hearted individual he was, but very polarizing in the fact that he spoke what he felt was the truth, and he would not mince words.
Exactly. He and I go back to 73. In fact, there's a great picture of him with hair down to here and me with down to here. Yeah, I actually had hair. Taken out of 73, and he bought a Formula Ford, wanted to race it. I had a Formula Ford and been racing, but he didn't have a trailer, so I had to loan him my trailer. And we took it out to Raceway Park, and Art Pollard came out with the idea of helping him as best he could. And Robin got in the car and took several laps and then came in, and we thought, well, we'll check a few things on the motor. And they pulled the cover on the motor, and it said no oil. But whatever they had in that motor was good enough that it didn't damage it, and he kept going. And he used to just eat me alive with all kinds of commentary about television coverage, much of which he didn't realize I absolutely agreed with, but I couldn't say. And then when he got the job with NBC, it wasn't a month till he came to me privately and he said, "Paul, I apologize for everything I've ever said. You're absolutely. I know you've been fighting the fight now." And he actually wrote that not so long ago on one of his columns. God, I can't believe it's a hit.
Yeah, that lunch you talk about, that happens. It happens for the fans that are listening in right here in Speedway. At Charlie Brown's is a diner over here, just literally 5 minutes away or so, and some of the all-time greats come in there every Friday, and he really did set that up, instigated it. It's been going on for years and years. I remember spending time with Larry Rice, the late Larry Rice as well, unfortunately. We used to travel Chicago together, and we did off-road shows, short course off-road racing shows together. But our drive to Chicago allowed us plenty of conversation, over the course of the 2.5-hour ride up and back, and great conversation. Boy, great time spent with Larry Rice, and just one of the nicest guys of all time. But he everybody has a Robin Miller story, right? But Larry Rice's story was, he said, I quickly learned that you never told Robin Miller anything that you didn't want in print. He said, I don't care if you said to him off the record, he would agree, oh, yeah, off the record. He said, but it would be in the paper the very next day. He said, and he pissed the entire series, everybody off at one time or another. Mm-hmm. He pissed them off because he would write it down, and it didn't matter what it was. But live and die by the sword. I think that same approach saved his career as many times as it got him in trouble.
Yeah, when he was in his head-on fight with A.J. Foyt, who was always close to Robin, they were always close, but they were fighting like tooth and nails, and we all had buttons, the round circle, the red round circle, with Robin Miller's name and the line through it, and there was like a week at the Speedway, everybody wore that. And
wow.
You know.
Isn't it interesting?
We have to remember the good stuff, though, because he was so good, so fun, such a great human being.
And it's so interesting how big of a fan of this sport that he was. And that's almost, he wore that as his badge of honor, that he was defending the sport that he so loved and the drivers that he so loved.
That's well said. That's very well said. Yeah, he again, if I take it back to like 73 or so, we were both we're trying to get our fingertips on the ledge to just be part of it. And he had the passion. He was hard on it and loved everything about it. And he left his mark. He left a huge mark in it.
And for people that want to see who he is and all of his brilliant color, he did a couple of roasts as well, and they're out there on YouTube. And oh my goodness, I mean, he's got Roger Penske up there, you know, playing the role, having some fun, which is pretty rare when you get Roger out of his corporate mode, you know. But the people that are on those roasts are absolutely incredible. But it was Robin at his best, and you could tell how deep that relationship ran with some of the biggest names in the sport. Yeah. Good stuff. So, unfortunately, we have lost one of the greats, and hate to kick off the show this way, but Robin Miller certainly deserves a piece of our time, and a piece of our time he will absolutely get. So we'll move along here, and let's focus on this guest that we have inside of our studio, because you, my friend, have had an incredible career. I mean, from radio to television, covering some of the biggest races of all time, historic statements, but I think really what put you on the map is from 2005 to 2017, the play-by-play on ESPN's coverage of Nathan's hot dog eating contest.
Thank you so very much. I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I was going to talk on it for about 15 minutes. That's when you know your career is going to the dogs, right there.
How did that come about?
It was. Well, I always had a job, as you know, that to work a network job as a regular, you're generally signed to a minimum of 26 weeks a year. And that was my contract. And it obviously was a great deal more than auto racing was available to our network, to NBC at first and then ABC later. So they have to assign you to other things just to keep you working. They don't really want to just pay you a lot of money to sit around the house. So I would always end up with these really crazy assignments, really fun assignments. I got to do the World's Rubik Cube Championship at the Opera House in Budapest, you know, and just sumo wrestling. And a lot of this stuff actually happening before cable and ESPN and those came along. That's the sports anthology shows, The Wide World of Sports, covered everything. And so I'd get all these weird assignments. I did one once called the Arcata to Ferndale Kinetic Sculpture Race. And it would take me the next half hour to explain what that is all about.
Let me just say, you remembered how to say it at all is impressive.
Well, the best moment was on the second morning of the event when they parachute gin fizzes to all the competitors on the beach. So, and that one, by the way, never made the air. So.
This sounds like a combo event with Nathan's hot dog eating contest. Gin fizz and have a couple of hot dogs.
They called me and said, "Hey, you want to do the hot dog eating contest?" And sure, you know. And then I had to go look it up. It didn't really exist yet.
And lo and behold, it became a very huge thing.
It did. It became. I did it 15 years, and it became a 4th of July tradition. I even have a picture that I saved out of Time magazine, where President Obama is watching television, and the caption is "watching the hot dog contest." So, yeah. Wow. But it was fun. The first time I ever did it, when they were ready to start the eaters, and I've already said too much about what I know about it by saying eaters, they said, "Gentlemen, Start your enzymes.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
I love the stuff. ABC, we all remember this. For the younger viewers, they will not. Something else they could Google and look up would be good. But the wide world of sports, the way the motorsports programming kicked off, every single time, and the agony, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, and we saw that trailer, if you will, every single time. And then someone like, it was either you or it was Bob Jenkins, would come on, and you knew everything was right in the world. It's just it was just the way it went, and a big motorsports event was about to happen. So it was a special time. We're going to take a quick break here before we let you go any further on that subject here, because I've got Carl over here giving me the break signal. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more from Paul Page.
This segment of The Skinny is brought to you by General Tire. It's more than just a slogan. Anywhere is possible with General Tire. General Tire's Grabber X3 Mud Terrain tire offers aggressive styling and is engineered for durability with innovative performance features that are ready to carry you through extreme mud, dirt, and rock-covered terrain. For extreme traction that's ready for anything and rugged styling to match, look no further than the Grabber X3. Make your anywhere possible by visiting GeneralTire.com today.
Once again, welcome back to the Skinny. Ken Stout, Michael Young with us, and Paul Page sitting in. Paul Page has covered the Indianapolis 500. He's covered kart, IRL, NHRA. If you're not familiar with him doing that, and did that for a long time, was very, very good at that as well. A couple of Emmys won along the way. One of the big voices, one of the iconic voices of all time here in the States when it comes to motorsports. Do you have a special moment? I hate to put you on the spot like that because I know there were so many, but what comes to mind throughout your career?
Well, on the radio side, John Cock and Mears going side by side for the win. The one that was done by ABC, and they were on film at the time, and they chose to put a picture of Rick's wife up just as the key move in the race was being made on the last lap. So I had to get in there that for radio. We knew we had calculated that they were going to be side by side on the last lap. We were looking at the interval just as Rick was closing, and I had this great little electronic stopwatch that was a thing of the day, and so I'm timing them. I don't know if I'm right or not, but so I tell the rest of the crew, we're going to focus on this, and here's what's going to happen. And so they did. And, that's the most outstanding crew ever. I mean, as it has moved on historically and different announcers come in and out, it's always had the same, it's a pinnacle of radio quality. But so here they come, the last lap, and they are side by side. And that last lap won from the fans' cheers. I could tell where the cars were on the track. I mean, there was this quadraphonic effect going on out there. And so every guy was so on it. Every guy on that lap, that was their pinnacle moment of their career. And I think it was mine too. The television side, Al Unser Jr. and Emerson Fittipaldi. And I had learned a long time ago that silence is golden, and especially golden on television. I mean, it's the picture, folks. You don't need, well, I don't want to say that, but the announcers can really overdo it. It's, you got a good road race going, and you got a series of downshifts coming, and they're talking over that. And I think, oh, please don't do that. And Formula One is like, they're nuts with talking and screaming. But so the last laps are coming down, Al Unser Jr., Emerson Fittipaldi. That's it. Last 10 laps or so. Why would I say anything? And I didn't. I would say, there's 10 miles to go, or this is lap so-and-so. And then I'd shut up. And then when they finally did touch one another, and little Al spun up to the wall and Emerson continued on, which is actually the word I said at that time, now I had something to deal with. And I was also careful that races, with all races, not to be on the top of my game the whole time. You have to have somewhere to go when something happens. Again, our European buddies are always, and it's like, okay, now this happened, and you've got nowhere to go. You have nowhere to say that's particularly exciting
No
because
level
you've
of
lost your
excitement
range.
to go any
So
higher. Yeah.
that I think was one of the things I am most proud of.
Switching gears from the John Cock call to the incident in '89, mentally, when you prepare, you can't predict what you're going to say. You can't plan in your head what you're going to say. And it just comes out. And John Cock wins it, and you should hear the excitement. And those are just things that you say at the moment. Mm-hmm. Or television, you had to switch your brain completely into another way to think. How difficult was that to do, to keep the Paul Page radio announcer in check to then take on the television broadcast?
That's a great question, because people wouldn't believe me, but I would say, and still do, that television is limited by the size of the screen. So, in my early days, a 21-inch screen was pretty much it. So if it's not on that screen, it didn't happen. And producers would yell at you if you mentioned something that wasn't on the screen. And essentially they were right. If I say, oh, this is happening, and then it takes 10 seconds to get there, that really messes up the audience. We do a lot of study on how the audience is affected by those different aspects. And so you're limited by that. But there's a sequence out of 77 where there are literally 4 simultaneous events occurring. In radio, you can do that. And nobody knows that this one was 3 seconds ago. So that whole theater of the mind, as Sid Collins used to call it, that comes into play with radio, and you're able to make things happen in a meaningful sequence. You might have reversed something a little bit. The radio audience at the track, they're not really going to catch that, and if they do, I think they understand. But so I always liked the expanse, the theater, the opportunities that radio had. Whereas being limited television, worse yet, having somebody sitting in a dark truck somewhere in the infield, and in many cases who may be covering like their 3rd or 4th car race as a producer, was just infuriating. And while I loved television, I loved what I did there, and I think we did some good work there, radio was always my love, which I found always interesting in talking with Bob Jenkins. He loved television and didn't like radio. So we were direct opposites on that.
The frustration is real. It's something that the fans don't know about. I'm very accustomed to what you're talking about because all I've really done is radio, very, very limited. I'm sorry, television, very limited in radio, but all I've done is television. And like you said, I mean, I've had producers come in and out, and some very knowledgeable, some don't know anything at all. And you are always limited to talk about what you see on the monitor. And we could be sitting, calling the event live in the top of the grandstands and look up over the monitor and see what's going on.
Right.
But you can't talk about something that's exciting happening in the back. And then how much grief have you received in your career? I know you've received a lot. After the race, they come up to you, the fans come up to you and say, how come you didn't talk about this? Or the racer's like, how come you didn't talk about our battle? I can only talk about what they put on the screen. Yeah. And it's super frustrating a lot of times when you have someone like that, as you say.
If I can, a really great example of that was when Kevin Cogan hit the end of the barrier coming into the pits on like the 2nd or 3rd lap of the race. I saw it. We were on top of the paddock grandstand. I saw that happen. I saw it start to happen. I saw him hit. I'm looking at the monitor. It's not there. It's not there. It's not there. Finally, they take the shot. And now we've got that. But I probably was aware of it 5 or 6 seconds before that. And, you're just, give me the shot, please. And the same thing with simple things. Like one of the most infuriating things with battles, you're looking like a battle for 4th. And you're watching it come down the straightaway, and the director is kind of following a large group, including the leader. And as they come sweeping into one, he comes away from that battle and picks up the leader. And it's like,
and they were about to make a pass, right?
Yeah, leader's got nothing going on.
They would inevitably they'll cut it right when the action's about to happen.
Oh, exactly.
And go to the leader.
Oh, exactly. Guaranteed.
What are some of your favorite television moments, as you've covered so much, and you talk, obviously, with your book, you talk a lot about Indianapolis. That's the crux of the book. But for you, just covering sports, what do you look back on and say, I'll never forget this moment, but maybe people would say, well, why would that be one of Paul's favorite moments?
If I eliminate auto racing,
right.
That's the way you're asking it? I really enjoyed doing America's Cup. I hosted America's Cup in 2003. Because I don't think they get this communicated today, and I don't know that I did it that well. The technology in America's Cup is just phenomenal. It's all carbon. In 2003, it was all carbon and fiber and everything. It was so far advanced, and a lot of subtle little things like in the mast, all of this instrumentation that the helmsman can actually see, and how the coordination occurs. And I really enjoyed doing America's Cup. I enjoyed doing speed skating. I did two major events, one in Nagano and one in Warsaw, where my producer, I asked him for any advice, anything he might want me to bring back to him in the U.S., and he said, yeah, don't bring their bad habits. So, yeah, I probably just offended a country, didn't I?
Paul Page is with us here on The Skinny. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back on the other side. This segment of The Skinny is brought to you by Toyota. This segment of The Skinny is brought to you by Rhino Classifieds. Tired of all those ads and random stuff that shows up when you're looking to buy or sell your car parts? Rhino Classifieds was created just for you. Welcome to a streamlined buying and selling app created by racers for racers and race fans. Modified cars, classic cars, race cars, that special big block you need, the trailer to move your baby around the country in. We got you at rhino.co. Once again, welcome back to The Skinny. We have Paul Page in the studio with us today, and we've had some great stories. Of course, we could sit here for days and days and listen to his stories. They are exceptional, especially coming back from the TV world there in the early 70s, right up to modern era, and seeing how the industry itself changed. With that said, I want to take you back to the beginning. And we've been talking about your career in radio, but you weren't always doing motorsports. And you mentioned Sid Collins. Mm-hmm. Sid Collins was a guy that kind of mentored you early on in your career. But what I noted was, I believe it was 1977 or so, you were doing a traffic report in a helicopter. Tell us about that day.
I did a half a report, actually. Now, we had a little Hughes 269B, which is like a 3-seat helicopter and glass bubble. Pretty rudimentary. And we're finishing up the day, and we're heading out to the international airport to land. And suddenly I hear a loud crack. And I look over at the pilot, and he kind of looks at me like, one of the two of us ought to know what that is, I later realized. We decided that was a crack, we'll keep going. And now we're passing over actually the parking area on the north end of the speedway, and there's another loud crack. And then we kind of lurch a little bit, and we're on the way down. And, okay, auto rotation, except I realize I'm looking at a rotor that's not moving. So there isn't any auto rotation. You know, we're now, I use the expression, a homesick brick. And we've just barely missed the Speedway High School and crashed on the track around the football field. And, yeah, that was, I like to say that that's the biggest touchdown Speedway High School ever had. But, yeah, that was, and we're pretty badly injured. typical of PR and this day and every day, the station didn't want to make I broke my leg, I think is what the station said. Breaking my leg involved my foot being up alongside my knee, so it was broken.
Wow.
What goes through your head when something like that is happening? Is it going to slow motion? I mean, obviously you heard a crack, then you hear a second crack. What rolls through your mind? It's like, well, this could be the last report for Paul Page.
Yeah, no, I was more taking in the elements of what was happening to me. And yes, it went slow for a bit there, hence seeing the blade. But I remember passing the top of a standard, one of the light standards on the field, and then I don't remember anything until we have crashed and I'm lying on the ground. I was thrown out of the helicopter, and I start to remember things then. Now, I wasn't unconscious. I'm just amnesic to the impact, because as soon as I'm conscious of what's going on, everything's back in real time, and I know what happened, and I did kind of a quick physical check of how I was. At the time, I was also working as a paramedic, advanced life support paramedic. So I was doing this like, okay, you're not bleeding from any of these places, but I had blood all over my face. And I thought, I don't know what it is. Well, that point, that field is about 200 yards from a fire station, and they never got the dispatch. They just took off, and they were there in probably 40 seconds. And just having somebody else there, and knowing, because I was lying in gasoline, and I couldn't, obviously my leg, I couldn't move. I didn't know I was hurt that bad. I thought I had a skier's fracture, it's a little closed fracture. So yeah, once I became aware again, then I'm aware in real time. I'm not in pain. The shock is so heavy, and I don't have any pain. I didn't realize that at the time. I really thought, they'll just drag me away. And of course, nobody wanted to do that. So pain came back in the ambulance on the tracks that crossed where Stadium Drive is, across 16th Street. We were going to Methodist. We hit those tracks, and suddenly all the pain in the world has come back. And it was dicey, though. I mean, I make light of it a lot, but that I lived through it still when in the dark at night when you think of those kind of things. I think, how did that happen? Why was I kept around? Kind of question.
I mean, that's honestly very fortunate that both of you guys survived that crash.
Yep.
So much has happened in your life, and it's interesting. And I incorrectly said the call, and I must correct myself now, that John Cock wins it, and you should see the celebration as you were describing what was happening at the Indianapolis 500 and when he won the race. But you, and we talk about this helicopter crash, you weren't always in broadcasting, covering racing and all these things.
No.
You really started from humble beginnings and then got a couple of big breaks and then took advantage of it.
Yeah, I actually started my my professional career here in Indianapolis doing classical music from this fine arts station, WAIV. And I'd do a show in the afternoon called Opus Legato, which opened with Vivaldi's Four Seasons. And the reason I got the job was when they were looking at people, I had just come out of the University of Tulsa, and I had to take a course while there on the pronunciation of classical composers. And so I zoomed through the composers. You got the job. You can pronounce it. You got the job. And then in the evening, I'd come back and do a thing called Jazz Flight 805, which the station was eventually bought by WTLC and its follow-ons, and that particular program, which was all jazz, kind of survived all that. But when that failed, then I went to another station, WATI, which I think 26 days after I got there went automated. So now I was out pounding the pavement, and I got the job that mattered. I got a job at WIBC in the news department. When I look back on it, I wanted to be a disc jockey. Well, thank goodness that didn't come through for me. But I was taught journalism, the ability to describe things, and in fact, it was I I was at the airport covering President Nixon leaving on Air Force One after he came to visit his daughter, who was at IU Medical Center. And that particular description, when I got back to the station, Sid Collins was all over it. He said that was really, really, really good, the way you described it, the way you put things in there. But all of the time when he was teaching me how to interview, and we'd have these late night conversations, he would always end that conversation with, "But there's no place on the radio network for you." So, but I enjoyed radio news. I enjoyed it a great deal, and did pretty well at it, I think.
What was Sid like?
Sid was a dichotomy. Sid was a first-class individual, a gentleman, always well turned out, always well-groomed, carefully spoken. As a professional broadcaster, had thought through so much of what it is that he would do. He was very studied in our craft. He spent a lot of time, for example, teaching me how to interview after I had a terrible interview with the winner of the Soapbox Derby. And when I came back, he said just that. He said, "That's the worst interview I've ever heard." Okay, well, I'm done. But then he took me in the back studio and started teaching me his method for interviewing. And so he was very studied. He was absolutely dedicated to the 500-mile radio network, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway radio network. But it's also really the only thing he did. He was a sports director at WIBC, which was a 15-minute show, end of the day, reading copy. That's all he really did. So he was always thinking about the Indianapolis 500 and how it would be covered and what would make it better. And he was very popular on the as an MC and a host on a lot of shows and things. And as a person, the fact that he never got married was something that always bothered him. And as a person with me, Sid was also incredibly cheap. And I say that with the good humor that it's offered, but Sid would do almost anything to keep from picking up a dinner bill. And he'd come to you and he's like you. He'd say, "What's your shirt size?" You'd tell him. He'd say, "Come here." And he'd go out to the back of his Cadillac in the parking lot, and he'd rummage through, and "I got a couple shirts that are your size." Well, they're his used shirts. Now, I don't say that with any disrespect. That was so funny that he would do that. This guy has, everything. He's obviously got a lot of money, not married, so he's not spending it, and he'd do things like that. And he'd do them all the time. And then you'd get this sly little smile. If I have time, another example of that. In the closing days of his life, he was bedridden. And I'd go over and visit him. And one evening I'm there, and he says, "Do you want a drink?" And that kind of blindsided me because Sid didn't drink. And I said, "Yeah, sure." He says, "Go down to the buffet in the kitchen and in the dining room, and you can get whatever you want down there." So I go down there, and I pull out a drawer, and there had to be 100 of the little airline bottles in there, plus an inventory of what was in there. So I took a bottle of them. I went upstairs, and he was now feeling a little embarrassed by the whole thing. And his explanation was, "I fly first class, and when you fly first class, you're entitled to 3 drinks. So I get my 3 little bottles, and I keep them there."
Wow.
Really,
An explanation of everything.
Yeah.
But he was beautiful. He was so much fun. And he laughed at himself with those things, too.
With that, we're going to wrap things up here. Paul, I might ask you, we'd love to have you here for part 2. Do you have enough time to stay with us here?
You bet I do. You got
so
it.
There you go. It's official. We are going to have a part 2 here with Paul Page. We have a lot to talk to him about, including his book. If you're not aware of that, we'll focus on that. Also had a very special moment that involved Martin Luther King. So we've got some good stuff coming your way here. Make sure you check out part 2. But we're going to wrap up this edition of The Skinny. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being with us here on The Skinny. This episode has been brought to you by Toyota, Rhino Classifieds, Dream Giveaway, and General Tire. For the latest in sunglasses, optical frames, accessories, and apparel, be sure to check out Fatheadz.com. That's Fatheadz with a Z. Production facilities provided by Fatheadz Eyewear Studios. All rights reserved.